Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Autumn Train, and I'm sipping on some spiced chai tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, Mars black, fire red, burnt umber, which I like to call brown, deep yellow, cobalt blue, and burnt sienna, which I usually call rust. So those are the colors I'm going to use. You can certainly switch them up if you'd like. For my tools, I have a white piece of chalk that I'll be using for some drawing. And then I have 3 brushes from my personal brush line, which is Michelle the Painter brushes. I have a 3/4 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 8 round synthetic brush, and I have a number 3 round synthetic brush. And I'll refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course, you can switch those up as well. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the same type and size of the canvas to the same type of paints and brushes and all the good stuff in between. So that's there. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to be painting the base coat of the entire canvas. So I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. I'm going to be using black and white, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix myself a medium gray color. So I'm going to be using this just as a background for the entire scene, because it's going to add a nice deep moodiness to the landscape, and it'll be a great base for me to build some nice rich colors on top of. So I've pre-mixed my color so you can see where I'm headed. So this is the gray that I'm going for. It's kind of like a medium dark gray. How I got to that was I used black and a little bit of white in mixed it together. So you can really make this kind of a little bit lighter or darker than mine if you want to. You could make it a little cooler if you wanted by adding a touch of blue into it. You can make it a little warmer if you wanted to by adding a bit of brown into it. But I'm just going for a real kind of basic gray color to use as my background. So this is about where I'm headed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up a whole bunch of that gray, and I'm going to cover my entire canvas with it. So I like to, when I'm using a nice solid color like this as a background, I will most likely use multiple brush strokes. I use just to kind of get it on there. And then once I get it on there, I will even it out by putting my brush across the whole thing in these long sweeping kind of brush strokes. You could certainly paint the edges or the sides of your canvas as you're going through this process, so your project looks nice and complete all the way around the edges, and it looks like you've paid the same amount of attention throughout the whole project as you did to the front of the canvas. And I'm just kind of going back and forth with because we used black and white, and we've got this nice gray color. It will cover pretty darn well, but if you find that you want to do a second coat, you can certainly do that. But we're going to be doing a lot of other details on top of this, so you can just consider this to be like toning your canvas. This is going to add the the tone, the overall tone to the entire scene. So if you don't get the whole thing covered perfectly, that's okay, because you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna be doing lots of additional things on top of it. And then once I got a little chunky thing there, and then once you've got this whole thing done, I am going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got this done and you've got all your areas covered, again, I do like to kind of, once I'm done, just go back and forth. This will level out my paint. If I have any spots that are thicker or thinner than the others, this will kind of bring them all cohesively in the same level. And then I will wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be adding atmospheric dimension to our landscape. So what I mean by that is we're going to be adding some depth into our landscape by putting a lighter area up in this top right hand corner, which is going to be the area where our train is going to be emerging from. And then I'm going to get it to go darker and darker as it comes towards the left and down at the bottom. So this will make it look like it's deeper and deeper into the forest. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush to paint, but I'll be using my medium brush to mix some colors with. The colors that I'm going to use are my gray that I created for the background. I'll also be using white, blue, black, and brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix myself a light blue color that we'll be using up in the top right hand corner. We're going to fade that into our gray, and then we'll be using a little bit of our gray, black, and brown to get the bottom and left edges to be a little bit darker. So here we go. I'm going to, oh, before you start the step, I do want to forewarn you, or kind of suggest that you make sure that your canvas is dry. So before you start this step, you can take an extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry, or you can do as I did and just whip out a blow dry and get it dry that way. So I'm going to show you the custom color that I'm going to be using for the blue. So I have pre-mixed it in through here. This is where I'm headed. How I got to that was I used some of my custom gray, and then I added a bit of blue and a bit of white into it. So what this did is it's just making myself this kind of light chalky or smoky blue kind of color, which will look great on this background and give me a lot of great dimension to it. So that's the only custom color that I'm going to be making. We'll be using our gray, and then I'll be using black and brown as we get towards the bottom. So I'll put my medium brush away. I'm going to take out my large brush, and I'm going to pick up that custom blue and start up in this right hand corner. So as I do this, I most likely will be using this circular type of brush stroke throughout this step. So this way, for me, I like using this kind of brush stroke in order to get the paint to blend and have kind of soft edges underneath it. I do know that I'm going to be having my train represented with some steam coming out of the top of it too. So if there is some light spots and dark spots, that steam will kind of it'll make sense with the steam coming up, because you'll be able to have some of those light spots and dark spots. I'm going to bring this about halfway over in through here before I start to fade it, and I'm going to bring it about halfway down this right hand side before I start to fade it into the gray color from the background. So again, I'm just using this scrubbing technique to start. In a second, I'm going to pick up both my gray and my blue, but this just gets my gradient started in a nice smooth fashion for me. And now that I've got that in there, now I'm going to pick up my custom blue plus my custom gray. So I have about equal parts of those two on my brush right now, and this is going to get me to transition down into the darker region of the canvas. So something like this works out, and I'm just kind of using my circular brush stroke, and because we used that gray underneath it, it will blend really well, and you'll be able to have a nice solid coverage. I feel like I want these two areas to blend just a little bit more, so I'm picking up more of that custom blue to just get these to blend in just a little bit more, so I've got a little bit more smooth of a transition from one section to the next. And now that I've got that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start introducing a little bit of brown and black to the equation. So I'm going to pick up some of my custom gray plus brown on my brush, and this is going to start my transition into the darker region of my canvas. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We've got so much stuff that's going to be going on top of this. So if yours doesn't look exactly as mine at this point, don't worry. Yours doesn't need to look exactly as mine. Yours can take on its own mysterious forest look on its own. So I've just got my gray plus my brown on my brush right now, getting it to blend in through here. Now I'm going to pick up brown, black, and gray. So now I'm going darker and darker as I'm going towards the edges of my canvas in through here. So this is brown, black, and gray. And you could get it to go really, really dark down at the bottom, but for me, I don't want to go all the way black because I know that I'm going to have my black train tracks on top of this. So if I go all the way black, I might lose some of that dimension. So I'm just kind of making sure I don't go all the way. I just picked up some of my original gray in order to get these sections to just kind of blend in together. And then we are going to be using our piece of chalk for the next step. So once you've got this done, again, don't worry if it's not a perfect blend. I've got mine just nice and airy and looking like it's got lots of texture to it. And then you can put this large brush away, take out your piece of chalk. I just picked up some of my blue and just to make sure it blends as much as I want. And then you can just get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be drawing an outline for our train and the train tracks. I'm going to be using my piece of chalk. I do recommend that, again, that you make sure that your canvas is dry because it's always easier to draw on a dry canvas than it is on a wet canvas. And of course, you could use any drawing utensil that is comfortable to you. You could even use paint to draw. It's wherever your comfort zone is. I like to use chalk a lot of time because it erases really easy. So if I make mistakes, I can quickly correct them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide you through a series of markers, and we're going to connect those markers. We're going to do a couple of basic shapes. And by the time we're done, we'll have a guide that we'll be able to follow during the painting in process of both of these objects. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do my train track, the outside edges to it. So I'm on the right-hand side of my canvas. I'm going to find myself about halfway up or down the right-hand side, and then I'm going to go about 2 inches above that and give myself a little bit of a marker. I'm also going to give myself a marker down in the bottom right-hand corner of my canvas, and then in the bottom left-hand corner, I'm going to come in about 1.5 inches and make myself a marker down in through there. I'm going to connect this dot to here and this dot to over here. This is going to be my train tracks kind of coming into the scene, and they're going to get really, really close as they come towards the foreground or towards the viewer. So I'm going to take it from here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a scooping line. So I don't want this to go very far over to the left-hand side, so I would say just come in maybe about 1/4 of the way into your canvas as you do this. So something like this, and then I'm just going to bring it down in through here to meet that marker in through there. I'm going to do the same thing over here, only I don't need to, I've got to disconnect this from this line at some point. So I'm going to just kind of bring this almost in a straight type of way in through here, and then maybe disconnect it maybe right about in through here. And then I'm just going to give this a continual line with a little bit of an arc to make it into this dot down here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're going to be doing all kinds of other stuff on top of it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a couple of basic shapes for my train. You can have yours as far down the tracks as you want. I'm going to have the front of my train in through here. So I'm going to make myself a rectangle shape like this that is going to kind of straddle or overlap the edges of my track a little bit. So this is going to, it doesn't necessarily have to be much, just a little bit over each edge will give you a neat look to the thing. And then I'm going to make myself a circle. So my circle's a little bit over to the right. It's going to be as far over to the right as this side of the rectangle, and it's going to be shy of that left-hand side a little bit. So I'm going to make my circle like this. And again, you could make yours into whatever kind of shape that you want, but those are my basic shapes that I'm going to start. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this top to this corner in through here with a long kind of, again, kind of a curving type of diagonal line. So something like this will be the way that I start that in through there. And that is all I'm going to be doing for my outline. Oh, actually, no, that's not all I'm going to do. I'm going to do my, the lines going across my tracks as well. So these are going to be farther apart down below and closer up top. I'm going to be just kind of giving myself these horizontal lines. So my first one, I'm going to start maybe about an inch, inch and a half away from the bottom of my canvas. You could certainly use a ruler to do this. You could make little markers so you make them of equal distance, but I'm just going to freestyle mine. If you want to make yours any other way, you certainly can. The only trick to this is you want them to be horizontal. So if you start to go diagonal a little bit, it's going to make this look more like a roller coaster as opposed to flat tracks that are just coming towards you. So every now and again, you can kind of just check yourself to see if you are the same height away from the bottom of your canvas on both sides. So that one's about there and that one's about there. So I'm doing pretty good. And then as I go up, I'm going to get these lines to go a little bit closer to one another. So I just kind of make them a little bit closer and closer and closer to each other. And once I get up towards that top, they're going to be super duper close. You might not even, see the difference between each one because they're so close to one another. And then we're going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put your chalk away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be doing the base coat for our tracks and our train. I'm going to be using my medium brush, and I'm going to be using just black paint. You could certainly, as we get towards the smaller details, you might want to use your small brush, and I might even too. But we'll start with the medium brush, and if I feel I need to go to the smaller brush, I'll let you know. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm basically just going to be going over everything that I did with my outline with black paint. I'm going to be pulling out, I think they're called railroad ties, the ones that are going across, or maybe that's the track and maybe that's a tie. I don't know. But anyways, I'm going to be pulling out the horizontal pieces a little bit further than the rail right in through here. And then up at the top of my train, I'll be doing a little bit more detail up in through there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start with some black paint on my brush. I am thinning out my black paint a little bit. So what I did was I just dipped my brush in water and just thinned it out just a little bit so I have a nice fluid paint that will give me some nice clean lines. And I'm just going to start up at the top and through here, and I'm not concerned if I get every single mark perfect at this point. We're going to have lots of leaves and stuff on top of the tracks that will, or other details that will help us to get these marks better. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pretty skinny up here, and as I come down towards here, I'm going to be pushing my brush firmer so my line gets thicker and thicker. So that's a good thing with using these kind of larger brushes, because, or it's not a huge brush that I'm using, but it's definitely of a larger size for these smaller details, but I can push that brush and it gives me a variety of widths that I can work with, and I don't have to do much effort to get that. Just it's a matter of the firmness that I push my brush. So again, just reloading it up at the top. I'm going to not push hard up in through here as it's coming out the bottom in through here, and then as it's coming towards the bottom of my canvas, I'm pushing my brush firmer and firmer, and this is going to get me a wider line. And if you want your line even wider as it comes towards the viewer, that's going to make it look like it's closer, and it's going to add even more dimension and depth to it. And then I'm going to do the same thing on these horizontal lines. So I'm going to push it really hard at these ones that are close to us, and extending it past the past this line in through here, and doing the same thing on the other side. And again, don't worry about them being extended perfectly the same distance. We've got gravel and leaves and all kinds of stuff that will be able to kind of disguise or hide any imperfections. And when I've traveled on many railroad tracks in the woods on my feet. I've walked a lot of woods, and there's old train tracks that you stumble upon, and the wood that's been on them for years and years, it sometimes is not perfect either. So don't worry if your lines are not perfect. So as I'm coming through here, I'm just kind of going to make my lines more slender as they go up my canvas. And as you're going through this white chalk, you may find that it turns your paint a little bit on the grayer side. That's okay too, because we're going to be, again, adding all kinds of details on top of it. I just want to have as, it as pretty solid line, but again, doesn't need to be perfect. And I keep thinning out my paint whenever I feel the need to. And I'm just going to kind of keep on trugging here. As I get towards the smaller ones, I'm sure I'll go a little bit quicker through the process, but I do like to kind of keep these in a horizontal way, so I am slowing down as I do them, and just to avoid it kind of going too crooked. And again, if yours goes a little bit crooked, don't worry about it, because you can hide that. You can hide a lot of stuff with painting, which is always a great part about it. And again, we're doing a nice fall scene, so that's going to allow us the freedom to create all kinds of other details on here. And again, I'm just following my chalk with a little bit of water on my brush or in my paint, so it thins it out a little bit. And every time, another thing that I do is every time that I go to reload my brush, I'm taking my brush and I'm spinning it in on the side of my palette or the bottom of my palette, and what happens is I'm repointing my brush every time. So that allows me to keep this larger brush on the pointy side even as I'm going into smaller details. So that's another trick, so you don't have to change brushes every single time you want to change the thickness of your line. You could also use a different kind of brush. So either angled brushes work good when you're attempting to do multiple thicknesses of a line or of varying lines of the same kind of thing. And you can use flat brushes as well if you know how to just kind of move your hand in order to make them thinner or thicker. But for me, I love my round brushes and I tend to use them a lot. I feel like I might be running into an area up here where I'd be more comfortable using my smaller brush. So I'm gonna hang tight on that for a minute, these top ones, while I get the base coat in my train, and I'll come back to these smaller ones with a smaller brush. I'm going to do my rectangle with black paint, and if you still have some of your chalk showing, you're going through this process and you're like, oh, I don't want my edge to be exactly where it, where I drew my chalk. Just leave the chalk there. You can erase it later. And so I just kind of am going through this in through here, and if I want to reshape it, I certainly can. And then I'm going to do my circle. So I did my rectangle, now I'm going to do my circle. And when I go to do the other part of my train, I'm going to leave a little bit of a visual gap between the side of my train and these two shapes that I'm creating right here. So that way I don't lose the information as to where that edge is, because I'm going to want it later on during the painting process. I'm still just using my medium brush to get this in through here. I'm going to color in this entire section with black, but I'm going to leave just this little tiny visible gap in between my circle and the rectangle from the side of the train. So something like this, and again, just using this brush to get these bigger areas. I'm going to change my brush in a second, because again, feeling like I want to, like my big brush is saying, all right, that's enough. We need to go into the smaller brush to get the tiny areas in. I'm going to bring this all the way to the edge of my canvas, following my chalk mark. And again, if there's some visible chalk left over after I'm done this step, I can just erase it with a little bit of water. So I'm going to switch brushes to my small brush to get the rest of these on here. And again, just the my thinned out black, and my hand obviously got my canvas a little dirty, so that'll be hidden with some strategically placed leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and get these last ones in through here, and then I'll do some details on the top of my train as well. And again, these little ones, don't worry if they're not perfect. I'm putting them really close together, so I just have this little bit of a gap between them, so that looks pretty good. And now what I'm going to do is make some architectural kind of pieces at the top, or mechanical kind of pieces. I'm just going to freestyle this and give myself some kind of silhouetted little pieces coming off of the top of my train. You can just use your own imagination as to what you want your train to look like. Or you could model it after a specific train. You know, that's going to be up to you. I'm just going to give myself a whole bunch of maybe little flat spots. Maybe there's some little pipes and stuff coming at the top. As I work my way towards the back of the train, maybe I'm just going to make them a little bit smaller. Maybe you have like a solid piece that kind of juts out and there's little pipes or something coming on. Just have fun freestyling this. This is one of those things that I incorporated into this painting because I thought it would be really fun for us all to just imagine whatever kind of details on the top of the train that you would want. And they could be tall. Maybe this one is a little bit taller and has, you know, some kind of structure or pipe or something up in through there. And then as I go towards the back, I'm just going to kind of wiggle my brush and give it a couple little details. And that's all I'm going to be doing for my base coat. We're going to be using, we're going to use our small brush. We're going to use our small and our medium brush perhaps for the next step. So you can wash them both and get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our train. I'm going to be using my small brush, maybe my medium brush too. Like I wasn't sure which brush I want to use, but I'm sure I'm going to use mostly my small brush. I'm going to be using mostly brown and white, but if I need to or want to go into my gray or my black, I will certainly do that, and I'll let you know. So what I'm going to be doing, we're going to be putting the light on the train later. That's going to be the bright area in through here that's going to kind of come out. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be giving my train a whole bunch of details in a kind of impressionistic, simple type of way, and freestyle kind of way too, that will really give this some good dimension and make it look pretty realistic. I'll be putting some smoke or steam coming out the top, and I'll let it trail back into the landscape so it looks like the train is coming around the corner. And again, all these little chalk marks that I have, I can either wipe away with my brush, or I can put a little bit of water on my brush and take care of those if I need to, but as I'm going through the painting process, most of them tend to disappear anyways. So what I'm going to first do is give myself a little bit of structure on the side of these two front pieces, and then we can just really freestyle everything after that. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown and white, and my trick for this whole thing is to not have a ton of paint on my brush, and I'm just going to be using just an itty bitty bit on my brush so I can control the quantity. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to kind of outline the right hand side of this shape in through here, giving myself just kind of a light line going down in through here, and I'm going to square off the top of it on this side over here. I'm going to pick up a little bit more brown. I will, through this whole process, be flipping back between white and brown on my brush in order to kind of shift the brightness or intensity of these highlights that I'm putting on. I'm bringing this just down to the ground. I'll be hiding this bottom with some dark stuff and some leaves and stuff, but I'm just kind of outlining and getting the side of this part of the train to emerge. I'm going to do the same thing up in through here. So this is just brown with I need a little bit more white so we can see what I'm doing here. So brown and white. I'm going to outline this side in through here. I want this to look round, so I'm going to bring this back as far as I want. I mean, this is the shape that I want. You might want the front shape of your train to be different, but I feel like this is just a round type of shape for me. I'm going to pick up a little bit more brown just to get this to fade kind of down into this dip in through here. I'm also going to use this to add a tiny bit of a highlight over on the left-hand side of this shape. So again, just a little bit of brown and white. And this will also help you to kind of clean up or reshape anything if you feel the need to. So just a tiny bit of a highlight over there. This whole side to this one is going to be hidden by the the headlight of the train, so I don't really need to do much to that at all. I'm going to pick up a little bit more white to give a touch more of a highlight up at this top part where I feel it would be protruding the most, and that's going to help with the roundness of this shape. So just going to give that a little bit more in through there. Again, this whole front area in through here is going to be covered or disguised by the headlight, so I'm not going to be doing anything to that at the moment. So now that I've got these two shapes kind of identified, I just picked up a little bit more white so I can get this a little brighter. Now that I've got these two shapes identified, what I'm going to do is I'm going to freestyle the rest of the train with little marks in order to kind of separate little pieces. So I know at the bottom of the train there might be some longer kind of apparatuses to for the mechanisms that go on the tracks. So I'm just picking up a little bit of brown and white, and I'm going to give myself some horizontal type of marks in through there. I might have some little vertical pieces, maybe where there's ladders or something that go up. There might be some little mechanisms down in through here. So I'm just really mark making at this point. I'm going to put some down in through here. Maybe this piece in through here is got some highlights on the top of it and it's separated from that one, so I can put maybe a little bit of lightness in through there. You can make the pieces of your train flat or round. You can have, you know, fun with whatever type of shape that you want to create. I'm just putting little highlights here and there. And again, my colors are just brown and white at this point. Maybe we've got a bright shiny spot at the top of this piece of the train. Maybe I've got some little highlights in through these guys. Maybe this one back here has a little bit of a highlight. Maybe I'm picking up some more brown. Maybe the side of this one in through here is a little bit brighter. So you just play with these varying shapes and marks on the side of your train in order to tell the story of, okay, well, that's a flat section to the train, or maybe there's a dark little area between this piece and this piece, so I leave a little bit of a black line in through there and then just give this a little bit of brown to make that part pop out. Maybe I've got more, you know, pieces in through here that are going to allow that piece to pop out. So I'm not doing a whole heck of a lot other than making a whole bunch of little marks on the side of my train. I'm going to go and do a little bit up at the top of my train. So again, just a little bit of brown and white. And if you want it to be more intense or shiny looking, you put a little bit more white. If you want it to be more subtle, use more brown, and that will help you to give little bits of information and dimension to it. Maybe a little bit more white goes on these guys, and then just fiddle with it as you're, you know, coming to a resting place of, and you think that you've got everything on there that you want. Let it dry for a minute and see if it's, you know, as vibrant as you want or as detailed as you want. So now that I got that on there, I'm going to put a little bit of steam coming out the top of it. So again, I'm going to just start with brown and white, but this time I'm going to add a little bit of water on my brush. So the water on my brush is going to allow for this to be transparent or translucent. I want the majority of the steam to come out this front part, and then I'm going to have it kind of trailing off. So I'm starting here because I know I probably have the most amount of paint on my brush right now. So I'm going to start in through here. I need more paint than that so we can actually go places with it. So a little bit of white and brown and water, and it's because I'm using these two colors, on my brush at the same time and water, I'm going to get varying intensities of this steam coming out the top of it. I'm going to have some coming out the sides, and the brighter your steam is, the more white you have in it, the colder the atmosphere is going to look. So it's going to look like a colder painting or atmosphere if you have a lot of white in your smoke. It'll look like your smoke is polluted if you put a lot of gray in it. So there's varying things that you can do to give it different looks. I'm going to bring some of this trailing back behind my train, so it looks like it, you know, starts here, but it, you know, trails off where it came from. So something like this. And of course, you can make it as intense or as subtle as you want. That's going to be your decision as you're going through this process. And you know, you can add more, take some away. I'm going to add just a little bit more coming up in through here, so it looks like it's just really rising. And I'm just doing it in a circular brush stroke, kind of scrubbing it onto the canvas with my little brush. You could use, again, a flat brush to do this, or a filbert brush, or any one that works well for you. And then once you've got this done, we're going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So you can just finish up your little train here, put your small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to do the base coat for our tree trunks and our branches. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm going to use are black, brown, white, and I'll probably use either a little bit of my gray or my light blue that I created as I go into the background trees. So I'm going to have background trees in the forest, and then I'm going to have a couple of foreground trees that are going to be lining my my train tracks. I'm going to do my background trees first. I want them to look like they're off in the distance. So I'm going to be using a very freestyle, just kind of vertical type of brush stroke. I want them to look soft, out of focus, and have just the illusion of a forest back there. So I'm going to start with black paint and a little bit of water on my brush. The water is going to allow the paint to be a little bit transparent or translucent, which will allow it to take on some of the colors behind it, which will make it look more out of focus and farther behind. I'm going to have these background trees coming about up to, you know, the bottom of the train in through here, and they're going to wrap around and come back in through here. So again, I've got my black plus a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm going to start with this real carefree kind of brush stroke where maybe some of them are a little bit thicker down at the bottom. I'm going to be using just carrying them off and maybe little diagonal marks up towards the top. So that's going to give them the appearance of some little branches going up in through there. As I'm coming towards this right hand side, I'm going to start picking up a little bit of my black, gray, and a touch of white on my brush. So they're going to start to take on a little bit lighter hue to them. So this is black, gray, and a touch of white. And again, you can use a touch of water on your brush, which is going to allow you to have this transparency to them. You can bring some off to the side. You don't have to go straight up and down the whole time, just making it look a little bit more organic and natural with branches that kind of go off to the side is going to make it look a little bit more natural. And then as I come towards this right hand side, I just reloaded with a little bit of those three colors, black, gray, and black, gray, and white. It's like, what are the colors I just used? So that's looking good for those background trees. And again, just have fun with it. It doesn't have to be exactly as mine. You could use some of that background blue if you wanted to. If they wanted them to look like they were even further in the woods, you could certainly do that. And now I'm going to add some foreground trees. So I'm just going to pick up black and brown on my brush at the same time. So I have black and brown. I didn't wash my brush, so if I have some remnants of the gray on there, so be it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a few lining the forest in through here. I'm going to make them much bigger than those background trees. So I just added a little bit more black to make sure that we can see it. So I'm going to put this big one in through here. And you could really make these into whatever you'd like. You definitely want to have some contrast with that background color. So as you go through this, if yours is not dark enough, if you're not seeing these foreground trees in front or with lots of contrast, then you may have to go lighter or darker with your color in order to give it that illusion. I'm going pretty darn dark because I want it to look kind of like a nighttime type of forest, but you could certainly make yours whatever you want. I'm going to have this one kind of curving out. I do like to have my trees wider at the bottom as they're meeting the ground. That just gives them, for me, a more realistic look to them. As long as I can get them to look like they're balanced and they're not going to fall over, I'm happy with it. And I have my branches get skinnier and skinnier as the farther away from that trunk that they go. I know I'm going to have tons of leaves on the top, on the trees up above. So as I'm doing this, I'm not concerned a lot about the top of the tree as it's meeting the top of my canvas, because again, I'm going to have tons and tons of leaves up in through there. So again, just black and brown is where I'm headed right now. Maybe I've got a couple trees that are a little bit closer to each other as I'm over on this side, and maybe they're a little bit skinnier as they're getting farther and farther away. So again, feel free to make your trees into whatever you want. They do not have to look exactly like mine. You just want to have, you know, as full of a forest as you want. Maybe you have yours all really lined up and they look really organized and they're just getting smaller and smaller as they go away. That's going to be, again, your call if you want them to do that. And then once I've got this, I think I'm going to put one more over on the right side of my forest and through here. So again, black and brown. I'm going to have this one just a couple of inches up from here. This one's going to be pretty big because it's close to the viewer. So we're going to put the base down in through here, and I'm going to have this one cross right over my train. So that way, again, it gives that dimensional element where it's going to look like it's in front of the train. So I'm just putting this branch up in through here, making sure I've got it the way that I want. I'm going to carry this all the way up to the top of my canvas in through here. And again, I'm, you know, giving my branches a little bit more width the closer they are to the trunk of the tree, but you could certainly, you know, build yours whatever way you want. Maybe you've got a favorite tree that's in the woods nearby your house, or maybe you have a train track, you know, that's near your house that you want to kind of emulate, and there's certain types of trees near yours. So, you know, feel free to get this to do whatever you want. I'm going to have this little cool branch kind of coming off in through here, and we're going to have lots of leaves and all kinds of fun stuff. So once you've got this done, this is about as far as I'm going to take these. Once you've got this done, you can, we're going to use our large brush for the next step. So you can put your medium brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are going to paint the leaves on the trees and the gravel on the ground, and the leaves on the ground as well. So we're doing the ground and the leaves. I'm going to use my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm going to use are black, brown, white, rust, red, and yellow. And if I use any other colors, I'll let you know. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to use some gray too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be dotting some gravel in between my railroad tracks, maybe a little bit over on the edges. Then I'm going to be building leaves. So I want my leaves to have a lot of, again, dimension in them, but I'm going to be doing just an impressionistic type of dabbing or stippling technique to give them their texture and their color and stuff. my light source is coming right from here. So I'm going to have my leaves the lightest right around the railroad, right around the train as it's emerging through the forest. So as I do this, I'm going to have everything darker around the edges, and I'm going to converge it and get it to go lighter and lighter as it goes towards that light source. So where I'm going to start is just with a little bit of gravel around my railroad tracks. So I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black, gray, and white. And when I mean a tiny bit, I just have an itty bitty bit on my brush, and I'm going to dab it off on my paper towel. The reason being is I just want to have these little kind of speckly marks throughout my train tracks. We're going to be putting some highlights on the train track itself. This is just going to give me a little bit of texture and information in between the tracks. You could even put a little bit of this over on the sides, and this again is just so it doesn't look flat and it looks like it's got little bits of information in between it. I'm just using the little tip of my brush with hardly any paint on it. If you bump into your tracks along the way, that's okay, because we're gonna again be putting different stuff on top of them, and they're gonna be well disguised by the time we're done. And again, just kind of putting little dabs of little rocks and stuff in between here, maybe little bits over on the edges and the sides. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to start building my leaves. So I'm going to start with the dark and work my way towards the light. So the dark is going to be, again, around the edges to my canvas. I am going to be putting little highlights on the tree trunks, like midsection of the tree trunks. So it's okay if I'm bumping into them while I build these leaves. So I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to start with just brown paint, and I'm going to progressively go lighter and lighter. So I've got brown paint on my brush, and again, I'm just going to be using this dotting or stippling type of effect. This is an area where I probably just bump into my tree a little bit. It's better to bump into the tree and paint the tree back on top of it than to avoid painting around that tree, because then it'll just look like you've painted around it. So hit it, bump into it, you know, be carefree about it. Don't worry if you bump into the tree itself, the tree trunk itself. So that's with some brown. I'm going to go up into this top left-hand corner with a little bit of brown. You can cross over your tree branches and limbs, especially at the top of that canvas, because there's going to be lots of leaves and stuff. You can even bring some of this up into the forest. So as you're doing this, you don't just have to keep them right at the bottom edge of these trees. You can bring some in back. That'll make it look like we're seeing into the forest floor. So I'm still with just brown paint on my brush right now. I'm going to give myself some darker ones over in through here, and I'm not covering up the whole ground. This is just allowing me to start this textural process. I got a little bit of brown coming up in through here. So now that I've got some brown on there, I'm going to now pick up burnt sienna without washing my brush. So I have burnt sienna, and now I'm going to start and get this, bring my color closer and closer. I want to overlap my burnt sienna on top of my brown so they don't just look like two separate sections. So I'm overlapping that brown with my burnt sienna, and this is where I'm going to start to bring some of these leaves onto the ground, coming closer to my railroad track. And again, you could make this into a daytime scenery if you wanted to. Change it up, make it into whatever is visually appealing to you. Bringing some of this burnt sienna back into the forest a little bit farther than these foreground trees. You can even, as I've got just the remnants on my brush, bring some of this over in through here, so you can already see it's really developing well. I just reloaded with a little bit of my burnt sienna to get over on this side, over in through here, overlapping it in front of my brown a little bit, or on top of my brown a little bit. And then I'm going to bring a little bit of this up back here where the train is coming from the far depths of the forest, and this is again an area where I'm overlapping or bumping into my tree. I can paint that tree on top of it, and I will do that when I go to do the details of the tree. So again, just burnt sienna right now. I'm starting to get right towards the base of that train, and letting, like, the train is coming right through all of these autumn leaves that have fallen onto the forest floor. And again, I'm not overdoing it, just giving myself some nice color. I'm going to go up top with that burnt sienna as well, and again overlapping it into the brown a little bit, but not doing too much, just giving myself some nice depth to these leaves. Now this is where I would kind of pull some of them maybe in front of some of these other tree trunks and branches, but not so much that I'm hiding everything. And then I'm going to bring this burnt sienna all the way across this top. So this is going to make it kind of look like it's almost kind of canopying the forest. And as I do this, you can use the edges of the brush to kind of pull out these nice soft, the illusion of branches just kind of hanging over that, that forest. And you know, you let yourself run out of paint. You don't have to always have it super thick on your brush. And I'm just going to kind of bring that a little bit. That's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to start going into my red. So without washing my brush, I'm picking up red. And I do want this to kind of overlap a little bit. It will get darker as it dries. So as I'm doing this, I'm aware that my paint will see the colors underneath it. I'm aware that it will change colors as it dries. So I'm exploring these color options with a thought of going dark to light. So now I'm in my red. I want this to show as these are, you know, having a little bit more dimension, but I don't need to overdo it. I don't need to cover every speck of where I had my burnt sienna. So this is just really giving me more depth to these colors of the leaves that have fallen. And again, you might want yours to be more orange or more red. You can, you know, adapt it to whatever is visually appealing to you. Maybe you want a couple that are just kind of have you know, landed in the middle of your railroad tracks. It doesn't just have to be on the exterior. Maybe you got a couple that have just kind of fallen in through here. If you want to carry that color elsewhere, feel free to do so. And then I'm still just using red on my dirty brush right now. I'm going to bring a couple more in through here and just kind of dab it along the edge of my railroad tracks. And then the next colors that I'm going to be going into after my red is going to be my yellow and then my white. They are going to be illuminating all of these leaves that we've put on, and they're going to be telling the story of the of where that light source is coming from. And again, as I'm doing this, I'm trying not to overdo it. I really want to have some, you know, light spots and dark spots and pockets of the brilliant fall colors, but without overdoing it. So I'm taking my time. I'm allowing myself to, you know, maybe paint over some of it, but leave some of the leaves, some of the burnt sienna leaves. So again, I'm just trying not to overdo it, but still give myself a good amount of coverage and representation of all the colors that I want to do. So now I'm going to pick up some yellow paint on my dirty brush. So I have yellow on my dirty brush, and this is where I'm going to really just concentrate on the brighter leaves being over more towards my train itself, because that's where my the light source is. So again, yellow on my dirty brush, which is going to allow me to put almost like orange type of leaves on here. I have not picked up white. This is just the combination of my orange or my red on my brush plus the yellows, and the red underneath is still a little wet. So that's going to allow it to give you these orange type of hues. And I'm not going to bring it all the way over here to the left, maybe a little bit on the tips, but it's going to be predominantly over here on the towards the train. And of course, I'm giving, you know, little spots, like maybe there's some little piles here and there. Use the corner of my brush, maybe put some on these branches that are just leaning over in through here. So again, watching it as it's drying, that's going to help you to build it in a more believable way, as opposed to just kind of going all in and making it super duper bright and over blending. If you find that everything is starting to turn the same color, which can very easily happen when you're flying through these and trying to do them, trying to just build layers quickly like this, if it's all turning into the same color, then you may want to let it dry for a minute and then come back and then just continue to add layers after that. So that's looking pretty good to me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up a teeny tiny bit of yellow and white on my brush. So just, oh, that's probably too much. Just a little bit of yellow and white on my dirty brush. And this is going to add those last little really bright pops of highlights right as it's nearing the train, and as the train is just illuminating the tips of these leaves that are the closest to it. So bottom side of here, edges of here that are closest to the train. And then I'm definitely going to let mine dry and see if I want to elevate these leaves any. And then once I've done that, I will be using my medium brush for the next step. So you can do the same, finish up your leaves, and then you can put this large brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are going to finish our trees and our railroad track. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm going to use are burnt sienna, brown, white, yellow, and maybe a little bit of black as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be illuminating the tree trunks as if they are being lit up by the spotlight or the headlight of my train. So it'll be on the right hand side of these tree trunks, kind of midsection. And then on this tree over here, it'll be on the left hand side. This is also where I'm going to clean up any of my tree edges that I might have painted over or missed with the leaves and stuff. And then on the tracks themselves, again, I just am going to be adding some highlights to speak to where the light is coming. So I'll add some highlights on the top of my tracks and through here, as well as on these guys as also. And I'll be making it the brightest kind of in the center where I feel that, again, that light would be illuminating it the most. So I'm going to start with a little bit of burnt sienna on my brush to get the highlights of these trees on here. So I'm going to start over on this right hand side of the tree, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of rub it in as I go towards the left of the tree. So it's tree bark, so it doesn't have to be perfectly executed, and if you have bumps in it, that's going to make it look even more natural. So just kind of getting this in here, and then I can scoot it in between some of those leaves if I need to. And then on the back side of the tree, I just picked up a little bit of black, and this is where, if I wanted to, I could extend that tree to make it look like I'm not, you know, that the tree is in front of those leaves, the ones that are behind it. So you can play with the finessing of the tree trunk based on that stuff that was behind it. So maybe we need a little bit more in through here. There we go. That's making the tree look like it's in front of these leaves, like that. There we go. And the leaves can certainly overlap as well, but I'm going to pick up a little bit more rust to get the light spot on these trunks as well. So just going to kind of go down that right hand side. I'll blend it in a minute, but just getting the color on here so I can have that as a good starting spot. And then I'm gonna blend it out into the left side. And if you had too much paint and that left side also turned burnt sienna, you can just pick up a little bit of black. Like I just picked up a little bit of black. Again, I can use this to either reshape the tree or blend it in with that burnt sienna. Whatever is needed or desired on your part is totally fine. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of burnt sienna and white. So I wiped my brush off of my paper towel, and then I picked up burnt sienna and white, and this is going to give me this nice highlight down the right side of the tree. So, and you don't have to take up as much space for this highlighted part as you did for the with the burnt sienna initially, because this is just intended to look like it's being lit up by that headlight of the train. So again, burnt sienna and white. And as I go towards these smaller trees, I can just maybe hit a couple at the same time and then blend it in a minute. And if you felt that, you know, one of the branches would be illuminated, you can certainly put a tiny bit of a highlight in one of those. So don't feel like it just has to be on the trunk itself. You could certainly bring it a little bit up into those branches if you felt that they would be illuminated as well. I'm picking up a little bit more burnt sienna just to get this to blend in, and you can get it to go really bright or subtle. It's, again, wherever your comfort zone is. The more contrast there is, the more you're going to be able to kind of see the effects of the light. But if you don't want it to be that dramatic, you can certainly make it a little bit darker. I'm just making this one a little bit brighter in through here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this tree over here. So again, I'm going to start with my burnt sienna to give myself the light edge of the tree, something like this. And I might have had a little bit of white remnants on my brush there that I'm noticing, but that's okay. I'm going to put some burnt sienna on the left side of this tree, or this area of the trunk. And I definitely am going to need to do some finessing to make this branch look like it is in front of the leaves as opposed to behind that the leaves are on top of it. So just getting this burnt sienna to blend in. So I didn't even pick up any black, just kind of getting this to blend in, and that's working for me. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of burnt sienna and white to give myself the bright edges to this. So burnt sienna and white, and just going to make sure that I kind of overlap those leaves so I can bring this branch back in front of them. And I think I'm actually going to pick up a little bit of black in a second too, because I feel like I've lost the edge of these branches that are close to the tree. But I'm just going to work on my highlight first. So I'm still white and burnt sienna at this point, maybe a little bit on this branch here. And now I'm gonna wipe my brush off and pick up a tiny bit of black paint and give myself, I want this edge to come back a little bit here. So I just put a little bit of black back on my brush to get the dark side of this branch. And so this branch kind of sticks, I can see it in front of that. So that's looking pretty good to me. So now I'm gonna work on my my train tracks. Maybe just bring this out just a little bit more. Still just a little bit of black on my brush. Just overlap it here to make my painterly eye happy. There we go. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to put brown paint on my brush to start this highlight process. So I washed and dried my brush. I just put some brown paint, and I'm just going to kind of skip it along down these tracks. I want it to kind of look like they're wood type of tracks. You could make yours look metal or whatever works for you, but I'm just going with a simplistic kind of wood effect. I've got some leaves that are on top of my tracks here, so I'm going to just kind of skip along those, putting just these streaks of brown in through here. I'm going to do the same thing on this part of the track. So again, this is just brown on my brush, and I'm using quite a bit of it in through here just to get a good amount showing, and it's going to allow for me to build that highlight process through as I go towards the lighter areas. So again, just brown paint, and I've got quite a bit on my brush, and I'm just kind of sweeping it back and forth, left to right, again, just to give me a bit of maybe texture or information in the tracks themselves, so they look like they've got some weathered type of appearance to them. But if you wanted yours to be nice and shiny and smooth, you definitely wouldn't need to add this little bit of an effect. And then as I go towards these smaller ones, I'm just using the tip of my brush. You could, of course, pull out your smaller brush if you want to. And this is where, everything starts to kind of come together, because you're allowing yourself, at least for me, I'm allowing myself to just kind of be free with my brush strokes and just kind of letting them skirt along. You could put little bits on these edges as well if you felt that that was necessary or worthwhile to you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of yellow, brown, and white. So all three colors are on my brush, just a little bit of each. This is where I'm going to start to add the brighter bits. I don't want to do it too much. I'm just going to kind of do it in a little bit less of a space than I did the initial brown, but this is going to give me working my way towards the bright areas. So brown, yellow, and white, just a little bit on my brush, and just this is going to get those little illumination marks. I'm going to be concentrating more down the center of these and less towards the edges. So as I do this, I can pull it out, but if you want, you can just start in the center and then streak it left to right. So starting in the center and then just streak it left to right. And if you run out of paint, just reload. So I'm reloading with a little bit of brown, yellow, and white. And I'm going to do the same thing, kind of start in the center, need a little bit more white paint there. And you know, if something goes, you know, too much or too little, don't panic. I always tell people not to panic during painting because it's not, you don't need to. You know, if it doesn't work out exactly as you had planned, just let it dry and paint over it. We can always come back with the black and make it, you know, look like it did originally, which was just with the black, and you can just kind of add these layers back on top of it. And then I think I want it just a little bit darker down here, so I'm going to add a little bit more brown to my brush so it doesn't, because it's farther away from my light source. And then once I've got that on, I can take a tiny bit of white paint and I'm going to add just a tiny bit more of a sparkle up at the top by where that light is. So I just put a little bit of white on my brush, and I'm going to add these little bits of sparkles in that center of that track. So again, this is just adding that extra bit of brightness into this area. And I don't even need to bring it down far. I can just kind of stop it where I feel it maybe gets a little bit farther away. And then we're going to be using our small and medium brush for the next step. So you can wash and dry this medium brush, do any little fiddles that you feel might be worthwhile, and then you can wash and dry this brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to put the headlight on the train. I'm going to be using my small and my medium brush, but I'm going to start with my small brush. So I'm going to be painting this very similarly, or at least the light anyways, to how I did the steam, which is going to be with transparent or translucent paint. I'm going to be using a rubbing type of technique to get the light to project, and then I'm going to be using my medium brush to create the beams of light that are coming into the forest. So I'm going to start with my headlight in through here. I'm going to have mine as if it was kind of at the top of this section in through here. You could certainly put yours up here. You can put it wherever you want, but I'm going to have mine in through here. So I'm going to start with a little bit of brown and white, which are going to be my predominant colors that I use, plus a touch of water on my brush. And this is going to give me my the airiness to the light source itself. So I've got these two colors on here, and I'm just going to kind of spin it out and just kind of rub it out into a faint or a soft appearance on these sections. So that was a little bit of white that just released itself from my brush, so I just put a little bit more water on my brush to get that to blend in. And this doesn't have to be super light at this point. I just want to kind of start the illumination of that headlight, and I like to kind of start slowly and work my way towards the brightness. So I don't have much paint on here at all, and I'm just kind of moving it around, letting it dry a little bit. Now I'm going to pick up a tiny bit more white on my brush. So what I'm in essence going to be doing is working my way from dark to light, just like we've done through the whole process. So this time I started with a little bit more white in the center, and now I'm rubbing it out. So again, it's going to give me this appearance that that light is glowing or illuminating the stuff around it. And because I started with the brown and the white first, and now I'm just working my way towards the brightness of it, it will make this light look brighter and brighter because I'm allowing for those darker values to be around it, which will make it pop out. So now I'm going to put a tiny bit more white on my brush, and I'm going to keep just making this little center part even brighter. I'm going to, in a second, put the beams of light on, and then we'll come back and put an even brighter center in through here. So again, just kind of put a little bit more white in through there and just kind of getting it to blend out. And again, it will get brighter and brighter as I go through this process. So now I'm going to switch brushes to my medium brush. So what I'm going to do for my medium brush is I'm going to be pulling light from the light source. So in through here, I'm going to be pulling it in this direction. I caution you to not use a lot of paint on your brush, but use a good amount of moisture or water. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to pick up a little bit of white and brown, so a little bit of both on my brush. And then what I like to do is I'm going to dip my brush in my dirty water like that, so I have good moisture in there, and then I just tap it off on my paper towel. It's always better to start with more moisture in something like this so you can have the transparency. You can always add the more vibrant notes to it as you go through the process, but I like to start kind of on the safer side. So I've got my watered down mixture, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling these beams of light out in the direction that I feel that they would be coming. So I'm just reloading my brush because I feel like I'm running out here, and I want them to travel all the way down my train tracks. I want them to be in various brightnesses. So maybe one time I push harder and it's got more white in it. Maybe the next time I've got more water in my brush, so it becomes more transparent or translucent. I can bring these beams all the way over. You can bring them as far as you want. The light from the train is going to travel really far, so you can have them go. Personally, you can make them go as far as you want or as short as you want. You know, I'm feeling like this is kind of an evening type of a scene, so I'm making the brighter my light is, the darker the rest of the scene is going to look. So I am allowing for myself to just kind of work slowly, get some beams of light coming in through here. I feel like it's coming around the corner, so I'm not going to have too many shooting off in the right direction. I feel like they're kind of coming down in this way, but that's looking pretty good. I'm going to put a little bit more white on my brush as opposed to the brown and the white. So now I didn't wash my brush, but I'm picking up a little bit more white, so that way I can get some brighter ones, and maybe there's shorter ones as I'm bringing this higher intensity of white into the equation. So something like this. I think I want maybe one or two coming all the way down my canvas or all the way to the end, something like this, or almost to the end. And because I've got the water in it, my lines are nice and smooth. I don't have many skipping marks or dry marks throughout that paint. And if you're having dry marks throughout your paint, like it looks like your paint is stopping or it doesn't have enough fluidity to it, just add more water or more liquid medium or whatever your liquid of choice is. I definitely want this to convey that it's illuminating these trees, so make sure that you've got it going in that direction. And then once you've got it as bright as you want, I'm going to put a little bit on I'm going to brighten up that tip of the light as well. So I just put a tiny bit more white on my brush, and this is where I'm going to get this center spot to be the brightest. So I just am putting heavy paint right now in my in that headlight. And if you felt that you wanted to pull any of it out, you certainly could. But again, I might just let mine dry for a minute and see if there's any additional brightness that I want to put on it. But that's about all I've got for this step. If you want to do any tweaks or anything like that, feel free to do so. We are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put this medium brush away, take out your, I'm enjoying my light beams here. You can take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I typically sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I think I'm going bottom left on this one with black paint. I'm using my small brush. I like to sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be. It's totally fine because it's your painting and you get to sign it however you would like. And that's going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a very cool autumn train image, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.